Welcome to Mentor Meetup. So Mentor Meetup is when we have the opportunity to talk with an experienced entrepreneur to learn about their lessons and their travels as an entrepreneur. Today, we have someone who isn't just an entrepreneur, she's also now a venture capitalist and a community builder. So she has a few different stories that she can share with us. So Lisa, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm good. So nice to see you all. I love talking to young folks and shaping their minds, unleashing new potential and ideas and possibilities. And I especially love talking about things I wish I knew about when I was in college because I never imagined I would be in a career path that I am in today.
That's exactly what I want to hear about. So let's talk about these things you wish you had known. And well, first let's start off with that idea that you never thought you would be on this career path. Where did you think your career was going to take you?
Oh, let's see. I always wanted to do something in fashion since I was a little girl. I grew up, I guess I was a little odd. I preferred to draw and cut up fashion magazines and redo layouts than like hang out with other kids. And I liked to, yeah, nerd out on my own with art and creative. And so I always knew I wanted to do something creative that made money. I was always voted as like the most creative kid and, top artist and throughout school. So I really enjoyed that space, but I didn't really know many career paths other than fashion designer or artist. And I had a feeling those were a struggle to make money. So my parents were a homemaker and a principal from the South Bronx. So I didn't have many career path options that were even in my current worldview and perspective to start to define what was possible. Um, Actually, when I was in college, someone came back from graduating my high school and spoke to us, and she went to Carnegie Mellon. And she said, this is the hardest school to get into. They accept such a small percentage and it's a top university. And just because it was the hardest thing and she spoke so highly of it, it was the only school I applied to, which I do not recommend.
I love that you went for the hardest one and you knew you were going to get in.
So yeah, I applied because I had heard of this thing called graphic design that I heard was something creative that could make money. And so I knew I wanted to pursue that. And I had this goal of working at Vogue someday. I mean, I was obsessed with magazines as I was a little girl, so of course I'd want to go work at Vogue. When I applied to Carnegie Mellon, they make you do all kinds of these take home tests and things to even just get through to the next stage of application process. And it was a lot of creative, and I presented my entire portfolio when I spoke to the dean when I did my school visit. And at the end of the presentation, I filled a whole auditorium with artwork. He said, "Congratulations, we'll be seeing you in the fall." I was like, "Score." So I knew I was on my path to do something creative that made money. I didn't really have much bigger of an idea of what that could turn into at that point, or even being in a university with so many options and potential. um, I was kind of still really insulated in my own lane of design rather than really exploring all the other interdisciplinary options. I had to take economics and psychology and English and all the things, and even C++, plus plus, which I hated. And I swore I would never do anything with computer science because it was so painful at the time. I mean, we had to program in Mosaic, in hand-coded Mosaic, which I'm sure nobody on this call has even heard of. Um, so I definitely knew I didn't want to go into anything computer science. And lo and behold, the first job I went to apply for out of college was at Vogue. And I was interviewing at Vogue, and learned that it would take probably a good 10 years before any of my designs would ever see a pixel that would touch a page.
Wow.
And I was like, but wait, what? That's crazy. Yeah, you'd be a junior art director, under creative director, or even lower a grunt designer. A lot of my friends that were working there said, yeah, oh my God, all I do is retouch cellulite on models. Like, that's not what I went to school for. That's not creative. So I really was falling out of love with that path. And lo and behold, while I was wrapping up my interview at Vogue, I got a call from a professor at CMU who said, hey, Lisa, I recommended you to Herman Miller. They would like you to fly out tomorrow to interview for one of two positions. They have a contest every year and they select two students out of 4,500 applicants for a 1 year position to work in-house at Herman Miller. I was like, aha, another thing that sounds really hard. I'm going to go for that. So I flew out there. It was like a 7 hour interview with everyone on the design team, and I got the job. And so yeah, I just kept finding these things that would lead me down a path of creativity and adding value and learning and adding to my skill set. I've always had this insatiable curiosity and desire to learn. At Herman Miller, I learned that design truly was a process, and that my degree from Carnegie Mellon was not just about making things pretty and, creating logos, and I had a gift for art, but it was more the process of design thinking. And so design thinking really expanded my worldview watching the Aeron chair being developed while I was at Herman Miller. I'm sure a
Wow.
lot of you have seen the Aeron chair. It's
I
in the
have sat in it for hours.
yeah, it was ugly when they first started it. Let me tell you, it was wing-backed and tufted. There were some really crazy iterations. And that's when I realized, hey, Bill Stump and Don Chadwick, just like everyone else, goes through a process. And that design and creativity is a process when applied to business. And that was really exciting to me. That something that was so creative could have a direct impact on a company's bottom line as a business asset. So let's see, after Herman Miller, what did I do? I went back to Pittsburgh, worked at a tiny little design firm. Hate to say it, but I moved back there because of a boy. And
Happens to the best of us.
yeah, but it was a good move because I joined a small boutique agency out of this guy's house. He had it for 7 years with huge clients like Pittsburgh Plate Glass and Blue Cross Blue Shield. And the first project when I got hired to work on was going to be Kathy Ireland's website, the supermodel. And I grew up looking at Kathy Ireland in the magazines. I was like, oh my God, I get to talk to Kathy Ireland. So
That's cool.
I, he basically said, can you do web design? And I was like, sure. No, I had never done anything. I had 2 weeks to learn what web design was and how to, what the constraints were, figure it out. When we got there, I pitched my designs for Kathy Ireland. We got the account, and it became one of the first websites that became really popular. Early on, still, image here, kind of a step beyond Mosaic. We were now into HTML, hand-coded HTML. And I got really frustrated that developers told me I started designing things for like Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh. You designed something that can't be coded. I'm like, really? No, I'm pretty sure I can. So I just started teaching myself to code by looking at source code, cutting and pasting things together and seeing what I could make work. And so before you knew it, I was hand coding the site and saying, if you can't figure it out, here you go. Here's the code.
Mm.
Not only did I design it, but I did your job for you too. Um, so I loved web because it was so much more immediate. I mean, if you could think of the progression from realizing creative is a business asset to then being able to have something that I think of instantly be made by my finger and pixels and having such an instant impact on a business's bottom line. Whew, it was so cool. I'm like, that's creative and it makes money. Um, so I fell in love with web because of that, the immediacy, the impact on the bottom line, the reach. and the constant evolution. I was constantly changing and learning things about the platform and what was possible. And then we went down the whole Flash route, and that was crazy. Shockwave and all these things that aren't really viable anymore. Um, I then went to Boston. Yeah, I moved to Boston to work at a huge branding agency. They recruited me because I was getting a reputation as being known for this web thing. And I move up to Boston from Pittsburgh. Pretty much 2 weeks after I move, they say, yeah, your whole department is no longer going to exist because the two other people we hired, we had a big argument with, and they're not going to work here. I was like, God. So I
Wow.
upended my whole life. I had a signed contract. I was like, what about my contract? They're like, sorry. So I was consulting with them now for something that I thought was going to be a full-time job, and I had to find a full-time job. I went and worked for this another small boutique agency that did probably 90% print design. And when I got there, I was really the first web person to take over. And 2 years out of school, I was pitching directly to Silverstream Software that got acquired by, I'm totally blanking on the name. We scaled this company from startup to pre-IPO, branding, web, marketing, everything. And the agency was probably, I want to say it was like four designers, including me, and one admin person. We broke $1 million in revenue for the first time in the history of this agency, um, shifting from 90% print to about 80% web. And I was the only web person within a year.
Mm.
And it was the first time they broke $1 million in revenue. And I went to my boss and said, "Hey, can I like hire some people?" Because I was doing the project management, the client engagement, the branding, the creative, the UI, UX, coding, and then hiring and managing outsourced coders for stuff that I didn't know how to do. We landed accounts from Hasbro, like Mr. Potato Head, which probably, no, the first site I did for them was Easy Bake Oven. Easy Bake Oven, back in 97, was the first website for girls that wasn't just a long scrolling page of text with image here, image there, and like pink. So my design, I was super excited because I, of course, was an Easy Bake Oven user when I was little. Um, I wanted to make it really visual because back in 97, all the boys' websites were starting to look really cool and visual and exciting. And for the most part, girls' websites were not. And again, it's because most of the people developing the websites were guys, and there weren't enough women developing sites for girls. So I got really excited and made this a really visual, really eye-catching, engaging, lots of animations and colorful graphics and horizontal scroll where people were like, "What? Horizontal scroll?" um, and it became the a big buzz at Toy Fair that year. And apparently the CEO or the head of creative and the CEO at Hasbro were like, who did this little website for us for Easy Bake? It's like one of our smallest products that year, and it got the most buzz at Toy Fair over all of the big things they were trying to promote and launch. I was like, that was me. So we got what was it? Mr. Potato Head was the second website. That was the first time I had something sent socially through the web and someone emailed it back to me saying, you should check out this cool thing. Because I made a Mr. Potato Head shockwave game where people could put, ears on top of his head and arms coming out of his mouth and move him around and stuff. Um, and then we did the Monopoly token vote, and that became the probably the biggest project with Hasbro. It had 4 million hits a week for the 6 months it was launched, and we were adding the first token to the game that had been added in over 50 years. So we had FAO Schwartz promotions. It was on every major news channel the night before it launched. My mom finally called me and said, "Oh, I saw your thing on the news, honey." Like she was understanding what I did for a living a little bit. Um,
Well, Lisa, if you were having so much success being this web person and breaking all these barriers, why did you leave and create Shopsy?
yes.
Where in the world did that come from?
So that came from, I guess, my foray into Silicon Valley. I worked in Silicon Valley during the first dot-com boom in 98, 99, and was fortunate enough to cut my teeth on mass customization, personalization, and on-demand micro manufacturing in cosmetics, skincare, hair care, and fine fragrance. That company was backed by P&G and Redpoint Ventures, and we were pioneering the concept of a consumer being able to come in, answer a few questions, us pushing back, well, this is going to be your formulation for your skincare. Do you want this scent or this scent? Do you want it unscented? Do you want to pick a jewel color for your package? Put your name on it. Everything didn't exist until you created your first product online. And that really set the trajectory for my entire career. Falling in love with big data, mass customization, personalization, and on demand. So it led me to eventually in 2010 architecting a contextual search engine called Shopsy. And that was built off of my inspiration from Polyvore. It's another site, I don't know if people on the call will know, but basically they created the first visual collaging tool for online. You could create an outfit and put a picture of the Eiffel Tower and a lipstick and a kitten, and all the things were clickable. I thought that's the future of search. Everything we consume gets used in a context, but we shop it devoid of context or with somebody else's context. They're putting it into a meaningful context, a dress, a bag, shoes, and two accessories, but it needs to be algorithmically modified to my taste. So imagine a little filter for price, items under 100, or color. I needed everything in black. Um, I was like, if they could do that, that's the future of search. They didn't do that. Years went by. I was like, well, I'm going to do that. So I architected Shopsy, the first contextual search engine that algorithmically generated outfits on the fly from over 6,000 brands with over 32 trillion possible permutations per 5 item set. And I got into Techstars. Bootstrapped it initially, raised some venture capital through Techstars. What I learned is that VCs will not admit what they don't understand. And I had a whole lot of grown men saying, I don't get it. Why don't you just buy some inventory like Nasty Gal? I was looking at them like, wait, why are they letting you cut checks if you can't tell the difference between a traditional e-commerce brand, which was what Nasty Gal was, versus what I'm showing you, which is a contextual search engine. We're closer to Google than a traditional e-commerce brand. And I realized that they wouldn't admit what they didn't know, and they'd rather tell founders to change their product or their idea to something they did know to be investable. And I realized I didn't want to take venture money from somebody that would turn it into something else that wasn't, in my mind's valuable. I was offered a few $1 million to turn it into a static look of the week site where I'd be a celebrity face of a brand and talk about style. And I was like, no, thank you. I wouldn't own my IP. I'd work at a company I hated and I'd feel like a total sellout. No, thanks. So I shut down. And after we pulled the plug, I got a call from ASOS, head of global innovation, saying, what happened? You made something we've never seen before. Um, I realized that VCs don't know everything. Techstars, the largest global accelerator for tech in the world, also didn't know everything. So I decided to build the first fashion tech accelerator. That's when I launched the New York Fashion Tech Lab, 2014. And I figured I'd bring the C-suite executives to the brands and retailers, from the brands and retailers to the startups that were looking to serve them, because VCs weren't making right choices. Maybe they would. Turns out not so much. They are not incentivized to invest in the things that are good for their business, they're incentivized to invest in more shiny objects that get them a bonus, and they don't care if the company goes under in 5 years because they're out of there in 2 to 3. So that's what led me to leave that and start to study the apparel supply chain because I realized that's the biggest opportunity. All the money that's going into VC is going into front end consumer facing stuff. Rent the Runway, Nasty Gal, all these e-commerce plays. But the real money of this $2.7 trillion global pie that is the fashion market lies in the supply chain. Only about $250 billion was being invested in, and that represented front end consumer facing stuff. So I left to study the apparel supply chain for about a year. And I was in maker labs, cut and sew shops, ateliers, factories of all different sizes, learning the ins and outs of why everyone was saying it was impossible to solve this problem set and applying design thinking. And
Can you tell me a little bit? So I just want to jump in here. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean about learning about everything? So you're talking to these people. How did you get in front of them? Yeah, how did you have the opportunity to speak to all these people and ask them the questions that you wanted to ask?
sure. So I actually was asked to be on the advisory board for a new startup accelerator in Puerto Rico. I'm Puerto Rican. And when Sebastian Vidal, the founder of Startup Chile, came up to New York to tell me about this accelerator he was being asked to build in my island, I I was like, "You're not even Puerto Rican. This is what the island is like. Well, this is what you don't know about my island. It's not like Chile." So I explained to him that there were some special, unique things about Puerto Rico that would need to be looked into, especially building up existing industries that have historically been successful on the island. And he said, "Well, can I take a picture of your doodle?" Because I doodled it on a napkin, asking, showing him all the things that I thought he wasn't really understanding fully. And so I got to go to Puerto Rico for a year. He said, I have budget. And I said, instead of flying me down for 2 days and putting me up at a fancy hotel, tell me what the budget is. I can make $1,000 stretch to a week, 2 weeks. I'll stay with friends. I can go all over the island, see what resources are there. And my friends on the island would literally book my agenda from 7:30 a.m. till 10 at night for the time that I was there every month. And they'd bring me to meet with local government, universities, design studios, seamstress shops, local designers, brought me to San Juan Moda Fashion Week. There are, everything from small cut and sew shops to 3 million, 30 million, and even $100 million apparel factories in Puerto Rico. The largest one has basically one client, the US military. And when I met that owner, I was like, oh my God, you need to diversify. Have you thought about doing small batch, quick turn for brands in the US stateside? And he said, well, we don't know how to get those customers. And I started piecing together all the resources on the island and saying, this network is way more impressive if you pull together all the resources as like this distributed collaborative network rather than one-off businesses trying to sell your services. And that's where I first started getting the concept formulating around the only way for us to solve for the problems of the fashion industry, the $50 billion of dead stock this side of the triangle, the fact that the industry has addicted consumers to fast fashion, and this race to the bottom, volume over production, that's killing our planet. Most people are not aware of just how toxic the clothing that you put on your body every day is. It's something you just don't think about. And if you've heard of the plastics problem, the microplastics problem, it's because of fashion. Everything that we wear today, most of our textiles have some sort of poly blend. When you wash poly blends, they leach microfibers back into the water systems. They get rained down on the tops of the highest mountains, they're in the lowest depths of the oceans, and now they've even found microplastics in umbilical cords in the womb.
Wow.
We are ingesting about a credit card's worth of plastic every week as humans nowadays, just because it's so ubiquitous in our planet. And
Wow.
so I was like, oh my God, if there's anything for me to dedicate the rest of my life to, this is a pretty great cause. And I think I have a solution. So the solution to me, applying design thinking and needing to visualize things so I really understood it and I knew other people could understand it. Once it's visual, it gives something tangible for people to react to. So I created a deck with my thinking, started talking to private equity funds that said they were investing in the future of the apparel supply chain. My solution was that localization is the only possible chance we have to meet the 2030 deadline. And the 2030 deadline is another key thing that most people aren't fully aware of. Some, you might have heard people talk about, oh, we have to hit some carbon emission date or reduction by that date. It's a big deadline. It is the date or the year where all the climate scientists around the world have agreed if we haven't made drastic changes in our impact on this planet by 2030, that we will no longer have any recourse on the trajectory of human life on this planet. That's a big freaking deal.
Wow.
That
Yes.
and it means that by 2050, every human will have to wear a respirator when walking outside. You think masks are inconvenient now?
Wow.
Anytime you go outside, you may need to wear a respirator, period. And so this is everything I'm dedicating the rest of my life to. I have kids. I don't want that future to be the outcome. And so there's no more time. We don't have time to unaddict humans to fast fashion in 9 years. We don't have time to retrofit a global supply chain with billions of nodes. Fashion is one of the industries that touches every other industry on this planet. One in every six workers on this planet works in some piece of the apparel supply chain. And so if there's an industry to refashion, this is the one that I know enough about and can sink my teeth into. So localization, to me, that really just seems like it has to be a simple distributed collaborative network of demand chains instead of supply chains. Imagine building demand chains. What does that look like? A network of regionalized micro factories. We're talking maybe 8,000 to 10,000 square feet, like a good size retail store, where you can have a consumer walk in, take their photo, or even from online, put their photo, gives their measurements, choose what you want to design. I want a dress. I want this neckline, this sleeve type, this sleeve length. I want this type of textile. I want it printed with this type of print all over the design. I want to move around the print to see how it looks when I shift its orientation. I want to see it rendered on myself before, on my actual shape, before I hit purchase, and then have it go directly to an order to a microfactory where we digitally print it. So your textiles run through a digital printer. It goes through a digital curing system. It's a low heat system, so any textile can go through. Doesn't require any water, no chemicals. Then goes to a digital cutter. That digital cutter then produces just the printed pieces, so you're not over printing and having to think about lot dies and ordering a large volume of different types of textile prints. Just prints the areas that are needed for the pattern, cuts it out. Then we send a bin to the sewing machine that now has the digital setup, automatically modifying the foot pedal, the stitch type to produce that particular garment. 90% of that process is now automated. And then the seamstress sees exactly what the digital bill of lading is that comes to the screen on her sewing machine and knows what to stitch. All that can happen within about 20 minutes.
Wow.
So that is possible. And if you have demand chains and you're only producing things after they've been purchased, you are eliminating that $50 billion of dead stock. You also have an opportunity to change the entire unit economics of how fashion gets produced, consumed, and 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 conceived of as a business. Right now, our fashion industries and retail are shuddering under their own debt. their own real estate assets, their own lack of agility and ability to adapt innovation. All the digital immigrant brands, for the most part, I've given up hope on. And it's sad, you know, you see all these stores shutting down, but it's also natural selection. You know, there shouldn't be bailouts for dying industries that just need to die because they have relied on slave labor or slave wages, non-living wages, on things that are toxic and intentionally disregarding the impact on the planet. You know, this industry has been so obsessed with landed cost of goods sold. That's what drove us from producing about 95% of the clothing in the US that the US citizens wear to about 5% over the last 50 to 75 years. It's all gone to China seeking cheaper labor. And so we're at the point where we're running out of countries to run to, and you can't keep squeezing coins out of people. You know, it's just not a viable business model. On top of that, your globalized supply chain is just untenable when you think about the average t-shirt taking over 10,000 miles to go from soil, growing that cotton, harvesting, processing, spinning, turning it into textiles, dyeing, shipping it to the manufacturer actually producing volume, shipping it around the world to stores for distribution. Retail stores now spending marketing dollars to move that inventory, it not being purchased after, you know, the whole season is over, marked down to 90% off, and then shipped back to warehousing to only be costing about $1 a unit per day until it gets shipped to landfill or incineration. About
Wow.
85% of our clothing goes to landfill or incineration.
Wow. So, well, so tell me then, so you're giving me a really vibrant picture of what this problem is. I now am not going to get the image of walking outside with a respirator out of my head. You said that you wanted to share all of the things you've learned along your journey. So I'm sure we don't have time for all of the things you've learned, but what are some of the most important things for students to think about if they are considering taking this path?
So when you're younger, earlier on, you do need to put up with a lot of people that are going to be throwing shade, looking to cut you down. Know that they are not your people. You have to put up with them when you're earlier on in your career and prove yourself and learn from them and move on. I'd say the number one thing that has served me is to know your value, know your worth, and then to only surround yourself with people that are your people. And what I mean by that is not that they're women, not that they're Latinas, that they see your value, that they value, your voice, your experiences, what you bring to the table, and that they lift you up and amplify you rather than try to extract or cut you down. Anyone that tries to extract or cut you down is not your people. And the quicker you can learn that, the more successful you'll be. It's amazing how much more successful you become quickly when you surround yourself with people that want to help you succeed.
I like that. We're right at 2:30. So Lisa, thank you so much. That was an incredibly eye-opening hour. You have blown me away, and now I have a lot of things to think about. So thank you for coming here and sharing those lessons. Everyone know that you can come back every Friday at 1:30 and we'll have a new mentor for you to talk to. Okay, have a great day.
Thank you.